and the energy that attracts new things to you that are opportunities and that are abundant. Money moves toward a certain kind of energy. It does not move toward energy that is victim energy or energy that doesn't have agency or choice. It moves toward a different kind of energy, more of an open, excited, energized feel.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Amy Kemp. Amy is the owner and CEO of Amy Kemp, Inc. In her work within this growing company, she helps leaders and business professionals understand how deeply thought habits impact every part of their work and lives. As a certified habit finder coach, Amy has led over 400 female business leaders through a 4-month small group engagement called Encounter. This experience is designed to help clients replace subconscious thought habits that are no longer serving them with more healthy ones. She has worked through the Habit Finder curriculum with hundreds of leaders in one-to-one settings and with leadership teams at large and small companies. Congrats on helping clients replace subconscious thought habits, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thanks, Carl. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you, because I think it's so important that people understand how powerful their habits are and how so often we don't realize the habits we've built or that we are building and how those impact success on a daily basis. So what are some of the kind of biggest pitfalls or kind of obstacles people have when it comes to how their habits impact their careers and their lives?
Yeah, well, it's important to really be specific about the kind of habits that I work with people on, because these habits are not the typical, getting up at a certain time or, following a certain time management system. Though the habits I work with people on do impact those things, I'm very specifically focused on subconscious habits of thinking. So this whole 80% of our thoughts that are happening below the surface of the conscious mind that are almost, actually, I think I could use the word all there, because they help us survive. Or did help us survive at some point. But when you employ these habits of thinking, some of them past the point of needing them to survive, they become detrimental and damaging. And they become resistance to forward progress toward what you want.
Yeah, well, probably the one that comes to mind for me when I think of, and correct me if I'm mistaken here, but there's this. We are fear change because of fear, like we have a fear of new things, because back in the savannah days, you went and wandering around new places, you might find a predator and you could get eaten. So the people that survived were the ones that were too afraid to go explore and try new things and make changes because they were familiar. They knew the familiar was safe, or they associated the familiar with safe and didn't want to get out of their comfort zone. And so while that was important back then, these days, with how fast things change and how much you have to be able to adapt, if you're unable to get out of your comfort zone because of these fear habits, these thoughts, and like the wiring of the way our brains are wired, then it can really hold you back, because if you stay in your comfort zone too long, then you're stagnating and you're going to be in trouble. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And it can play out in a lot of different ways. As a quick, easy example, if you're an entrepreneur, the energy and the thinking that it takes to get a business off the ground, if you continue to think and operate that way past the point of reaching cruising altitude, you will crash and burn just like an airplane would. It takes a lot of fuel to get a plane off the ground, but if you continue to burn fuel at that pace, you continue to work the number of hours and really exert the amount of energy that you did at the beginning, your plane will crash and burn. And so that's an example of, yes, that served you to help you survive during a launch phase. But if you get to cruising altitude and you don't shift, that can cause real health issues and very significant challenges for business owners. So things like that. And the example that you gave, also great example. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, I like your example too, because as companies are growing, and I think it's why you see all like the whole fractional model exists for a lot of startups is really good, because the sort of skills and experience or kind of mindset you need when you're growing from like 1 million to 5 million is not the same as from 5 to 20. It's a very different like kind of challenges and experience needed for it. And so I can see how also if you're like a founder and you're staying on during that shift and you're bringing other fractionals, but if you're not changing yourself in the way you're operating,
Mm-hmm.
when you get to that inflection point, then yeah, there's going to be some problems. And I imagine because of just the nature of habits that it's takes a lot more effort to make those changes than people think, because they're probably, again, it's underlying in the way our brains are wired. There's actually like habits actually change the way we're wired. So if you're trying to adjust that quickly, that could be a challenging experience, and hence why I imagine the work you're doing is so valuable, because there's if you're not even like aware of the habits you've built,
Mm-hmm.
then you can't change it if you're not able to like name them and track them, that sort of stuff. So what's kind of the process that you've helped people through? Because I imagine there's kind of these ideas, but like what's the kind of the success story you've had where people go, oh, I can see how recognize those pain points and how some that like they can see the transformation.
Yeah, of course. And I think just to back up a quick second, the tool that I use, which is called the Habit Finder, it provides that snapshot of what's happening at the subconscious level in your brain so that you can actually have language and words to identify, oh, I can, now that I know that, I'm starting to become aware that it's even happening. So I'll give you a really quick example that's pretty applicable to a lot of people. There's a habit of thinking in the assessment that when it is at risk, and I always use the word risk because our habits of thinking are grooves in our brain. It doesn't mean we always go down them. Sometimes when you're very consciously aware, you can sidestep that habit of thinking, or even you may at work be showing up at your best because you're very consciously aware, but then you go home and slide into these habits of thinking. So one of them, there's a high risk toward obligation thinking, which says, I have to, I need to, I should. And I was just talking with a client this week, actually, where she was at high risk of her subconscious mind falling into this habit. And when she described what it felt like to go through her day as a business owner, she said, it feels like I'm wearing a backpack with 100 pounds of bricks in it. Everything feels heavy. And even her posture when she talked about it was sort of hunched over. Her shoulders were crunched in and she was kind of like bent over. And as we talked about replacing that habit of thinking, and just every time she heard herself think or say, I have to, I need to, or I should, just stopping. So a lot of times we'll use like a motion with your hands, sort of like you're chopping wood, like with an axe where you hit it, because you've got to disrupt the subconscious mind and you've got to bring it to the conscious mind, which in order to do that, you either must speak it out loud or do some sort of physical movement that disrupts the subconscious pattern. So she would do her little like chopping motion on her hand and say, stop, I get to, I choose to, I want to do the very same thing. Fill out this report for my accountant, or follow up with this potential client, or, answer this email from a difficult person. So that one shift, she described as just being able to sleep better, having more energy that actually helped her create some new business. And what was so fascinating is that nothing changed, right? Like nothing changed about her experience outside of just the way she was thinking about it. So very, very, very powerful.
Yeah, that's such a, it seems like it minor caveat to like when you talk about the impact it had, but it just is a little mindset shift of, and the difference in vocabulary from have to, need to, should to, get to, want to,
Choose to.
is yeah, and so that's because there's a lot more, the language we use impacts the way we think in a lot more ways than people are aware of. And even the whole section of like the actual language you speak changes the way you like, it impacts the culture and like the way people view the world, because it's for example, English speaking cultures, because English requires a subject in a sentence to be grammatically correct, are a lot more focused on blame. Like who's it responsible for the bad thing happening, compared to like Spanish, where just like the bad thing happened, but there doesn't have to be someone at fault necessarily. So but I can see also like if you're constantly saying, oh, I have to do this, I need to do this, and I must do this, or I should do this, there's that, it's something being imposed on you where it's not your choice.
Powerless.
It's a burden,
Yep.
an onus on you. Whereas I get to, I want to, I'm excited to, that just changes the way your brain processes it and the sort of emotions you attach to the tasks, and that has a whole different slew of chemical reactions and physiologically in your brain and your body. Because of that, it has a whole cascade effect that it doesn't seem on paper like a big difference, but it can have a huge impact, like you said, on her body and like the stress level and the not having that backpack full of bricks.
Yep. And the energy that attracts new things to you that are opportunities and that are abundant. Money moves toward a certain kind of energy. It does not move toward energy that is victim energy or energy that doesn't have agency or choice. It moves toward a different kind of energy, more of an open, excited, energized feel.
Yeah, and it's I think there's mirrors or kind of reinforces the importance of those habits and the power that habits have, because and being aware of what habits you built or you, and I think there's just an underlying lack of kind of mindfulness or awareness, like self-awareness
Yeah.
in the world, where people don't really, because there's so many things vying for our attention, or so many easy distractions from doing the sort of self-reflection and self-analysis and connecting with ourselves and other people, that a lot of people don't have the kind of muscles or they haven't exercised these the mindfulness muscles, so they don't really know what habits they've built. And so it's I imagine when you're working with people, there's a lot of moments where you're talking with someone, they kind of like a oh damn moment, where like, oh, I didn't realize I was doing
Yes.
this. Like,
It's a
oh,
blind spot for sure. Yeah. Well, the first time I took the Habit Finder as a client, which would have been over 15 years ago, I was a little irritated, upset. I was kind of like, well, I don't think that's really accurate. And then I started to move through my life with even just the smidge of awareness that I'd been given through the tool. And then I started to see like, oh, there it is again. Oh, there it is again. Oh, I noticed it more and more and more and more frequently. And it was eye-opening. And I have people take it who feel they're a little off-put, I would say, because we're generally terrible at self-awareness as human beings. We don't see ourselves nearly as clearly as other people see us. It's almost impossible to objectively see yourself.
oh yeah, we're very much biased as a skews a lot of our views of ourselves, and having
Yeah.
it's always good to have someone like a coach or a colleague that can call us out for the kind of the BS we tell ourselves.
Yeah. We're
Um,
also terrible at seeing our strengths. I often will say to my clients, I just said it today to a client, we undervalue. This is actually in my book also, but the things that feel so easy to us and that astonish other people. So what are the things that you do that feel so easy to you, but astonish other people? And this client of mine, she has a brilliant strategic business mind. And so she had legitimately in 30 seconds sort of laid out like a revenue flow for a potential new business that would come in monthly to ensure that there was like consistent revenue flow. And I said to her, pause for a second. Do you know that not everyone can do that? Not everyone, not everyone can just in 30 seconds figure out how to create a payment system that sort of makes it a viable business. And she said, oh, well, that's not really, I mean, I said, no, that's a really high level skill and you're undervaluing it. You're not recognizing your own natural genius that is so easy to you. So yeah, we're terrible. Sometimes I think people hire me just because I see them. I can see what their strengths are and tell them. When you hear it, you know it to be true. Like when I said that to her, she thought, yes, that's true. She knows that, but she never could have articulated it or identified it herself.
yeah, there's a lot of, and there's a great expert on human bias. His name's Matthew Cahill. He has a whole like business around helping people identify unconscious bias. And there's from talking with him and his and engaging his content, I've learned a lot about how bad we are at seeing ourselves, or at least seeing ourselves clearly, because of all the way our brains are wired to for protecting ourselves in air quotes there, because they're again it's trying to help, but oftentimes gets in our own ways of accomplishing our goals, and we can't see and accurately assess our own skills. So having someone who can point these things out, that once they mention, someone else says, you go, oh yeah, that makes total sense, I totally see it now, but you couldn't see it yourself without someone else pointing it out first, is very common. And so having especially if you're like a leader leading a company, having team members that are not just reinforcing your existing biases, but can call you out on yourself and give you that accurate feedback that might be hard to hear, but are definitely give you a more accurate view of your skills, or what like shortcomings, or like the habits you've built, or the way you're thinking. If they're seeing the kind of performance or like the burnout signs, other things that these harmful like thought habits can lead to, having someone else who can give you that perspective and give you the like, hey, I'm seeing red flags, how's it going? Maybe you shouldn't keep making excuses for why you're feeling this way. Maybe you need to actually do some work to shift from taking off to cruising altitude before we run out of fuel here, or you run out of fuel.
Sure.
Those are all really important to have people that can on their team that can point those out for you, because it's so easy to fool yourself into thinking you're fine, and not recognizing like I said, the genius that you have, that you think, oh, everyone can do this, right? And like people are like, no, we can't do that. That's awesome.
Totally. Absolutely.
So what's kind of obviously about you just asked me what the first step is when you get started on kind of identifying the habits, but you have this awesome habit finder tool.
Yeah.
That kind of, and I've taken it, and it definitely was one of those things where I was looking at it and like, nailed it. It's kind of eerie how like accurate it identifies your habits and where you need to work on things. And I think I'm fortunate enough to be fairly mindful of myself and more work in this space, and so I could recognize, yeah, that's I didn't have like the defense of like, how dare it claim that I'm this way. I'm like, nope. So where's how can people find this assessment? What's a good way to get started working on this stuff? Because it's stuff that again, the more you put this off,
Mhm.
the more it's going to likely blow up in your face. But if you can just kind of start on this process sooner rather than later, it can be a game changer, especially if you're getting close to that inflection point where you need to stop, stop gaining altitude and start cruising. So what's kind of the right
Yeah.
way to get started with this?
And let me be clear that cruising in terms of output of energy and time doesn't mean cruising in terms of revenue coming in or income either, right? That can continue to increase while you level out or even lessen your investment of time and energy in a business, but not if you're thinking the same way you were thinking when you started the business. So the first step obviously would be to take the habit finder, which you can take for free at my website, which is just my name, amykemp.com. It says right at the top, take the free habit finder assessment. And you get your results right away, both in kind of a chart format. And then there's also a PDF that you can print out that's a 44-page kind of breakdown of each of the different habits that you can access right away. So that would be step number one. You know, it's really interesting. I often talk to business owners or people who work within a company or an organization or the government or a nonprofit, and they're investing a lot of money in these sort of like sales training or things that they see as having a direct impact on, like a direct ROI. In my experience, there's rarely growth in a business or a career without internal personal growth. We want to fix all these external things. But if you do all of that training and all of it has value, I'm not suggesting it doesn't, but you don't address the deeper inside journey, there will be fits and stops and resistance the entire way. You might get there, but I will tell you, if you will work on you and lower some of the walls of resistance by doing work with any kind of coach who has no agenda, no personal attachment, but who's just able to hold space for you and your experience. I've not seen anything have a more impactful ROI on any business I've started or built or anyone else's, frankly. And yet it sometimes feels like a soft item or like it's not a business expense but I just can't think of anything more impactful than a transforming leader in terms of creating an outcome.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Amy. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with either of us, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.